devouring people alive, terrorizing deep dark tunnels, tending to your nightmarish eggs in the underground caverns, getting shot in the face with a machine gun, and surviving, only to cause pain and terror once again the next day. Does this sound like an average day to you? Choo Choo Charles woke up just like he did every other day, exactly whenever he felt like it. Down in the caverns, it was hard to tell what time of day it was, and he didn't have an alarm clock down there anyway, so he'd just get up whenever he had a reason to. Usually, that was because he was getting hungry. On this particular day, however, it was because a loud noise shook him from his slumber. It sounded like someone was trying to invade his lair. Well, it was a little early for breakfast, but who was he to complain about a meal delivering itself? So he stretched out his spider legs and rose up to his full massive height and began skittering toward the source of the sound. He had no trouble navigating the caverns. After all, he knew these tunnels like the back of his claws, and he knew them as well as he knew the feeling of bones crunching between his sharp teeth. He moved quickly and quietly, sneaking up on his potential prey until it was time to pounce. No use alerting the intruder to his presence and giving him time to run. He spotted it near the entrance of the cave, a small, glowing light, a torch, and holding it was a puny little human man. Perfect. It was only a matter of time. They just never learned to stay away, and Charles was grateful for their foolishness. Time to lie perfectly still and wait for the human's curiosity to be the death of him. Charles sat there in the darkness, watching the human explore the mouth of the cave for quite some time. He was almost starting to drift off to sleep again, but then he heard it, the pitter-patter of little human feet moving closer. It was time. He let the man walk past him, not even noticing the monster in the shadows, and then, slowly, carefully, he began to follow. This was the best part, stalking his prey, waiting for them to wander deep enough into the caverns that they could not possibly make it back out before the train gobbled them up. They always screamed the most delicious screams when they realized they were trapped. Charles could feel his mouth watering just thinking about it. The man shined his torch along the walls of the cavern, looking for traces of Choo Choo Charles, all the while ignorant to the fact that the very creature he sought was lurking just behind him. The man heard a sound behind them, the clatter of stone on stone. He whirled around to check, but all he saw was a bit of rock that had shifted out of place. He didn't see Charles skittering out of sight, and continued deeper into the cavern. Soon, very soon, it would be time to strike. Charles was still waiting for the opportune moment to attack the man with the torch, when the torch's light illuminated what first seemed to be a cluster of colored, glittering gemstones, but Charles knew what they were immediately. They were his eggs that would soon be hatching into his children. The human man produced a burlap sack and began stuffing the eggs inside. No! How dare this puny human steal his eggs? Charles couldn't help himself. He roared in anger. The man spun around and came face to face with Charles, who was baring his teeth and rearing up to strike. The man threw the torch at Charles, its flame burning him as he lurched back away from it. The momentary shock of the burn gave the man just enough time to gather up the sack of eggs and start running. The man managed to dip out of sight, vanishing around a corner, but there was no way Charles was letting him get away that easily. At first, this was just about a meal, but now that the intruder had stolen his eggs, it was personal. Choo Choo Charles ramped up his speed, shifting into what he privately thought of as turbo mode. No human could escape him once he was in turbo mode. He raced after the man, his steps rumbling and rattling the cavern as he went. When he caught up to the man, he was almost at the entrance to the cavern. Close, but not good enough. No one gets away from Choo Choo Charles. He grinned, ready to swallow the man whole. But as he reared back and prepared to strike, the man reached into the burlap sack he was carrying. He pulled out a green egg and threw it right at Charles's face. It hit him with a smack, catching him by surprise. This man had the audacity to come into his lair, steal his eggs, and then attack him with his own children? Unacceptable. He would have a painful death for that, eaten one bite at a time. He charged at the man but was met with 2 more eggs to the face. One of the eggs hit the ground after bouncing off of Charles, and he noticed a crack in its side. Charles rushed to attend to the egg and make sure it was still intact. While he was distracted, the man escaped, running out of the cavern and back toward the town. Charles turned to see the man was gone. He was furious, but he knew he would have his revenge later. First, he would gather the eggs and return them to their rightful places. A few hours later, after Choo Choo Charles was certain that all of his eggs were safe and sound, and his injuries were attended to, Charles was ready to do something he very rarely did: go outside of his lair. He didn't like to venture out into the world, where it was harder to hide and easier to expose himself to human attacks. But he was hungry, and he was tired, and he was angry enough to put aside his ordinary routine. He would track down the man who dared to try to steal his eggs, who dared to throw them into his face, and he would not rest until that man was his dinner. He said goodbye to each of his eggs, made sure they were safe and sound, and began scuttling toward the mouth of the cavern. Choo Choo Charles didn't go near the town often, but when he did, he knew exactly how to avoid detection. He waited until the sun went down and traveled through the densest parts of the forest that could accommodate his massive form. He wouldn't step into the light until it was absolutely necessary. Until he had laid eyes on his target, he found him, the human man who had been so bold earlier that day. The man was going about his evening routine hunched over a desk inside his home on the edge of the forest. Little did he know that the threat he had just barely managed to escape had come to his door. Well, not exactly the door. Choo Choo Charles was much too big to fit through the door, so he'd have to make a door of his own. He had done this before, and he knew exactly what he needed to do. He backed up, building up distance and momentum, and then ran full speed at the side of the house, plowing through the wall with a thunderous crash. The man fell out of his chair in shock when he saw Charles burst through the wall of his house. It was just what Charles had wanted him to do. He rushed the man, ready to snap him up in his jaws, but the man had a trick up his sleeve. More specifically, he had a knife up his sleeve and slashed at Charles as he tried to attack. In the time this bought him, the man scrambled to his feet and ran through the still intact door toward a shed outside. Charles chuckled to himself at this. What did the man think he would do? Hide away in the shed and be safe somehow? How absurd. Charles didn't even bother to hurry over to the shed once he saw the man rush inside. What could he possibly have in there that would be enough to take on the mighty Choo Choo Charles himself? Well, Charles got his answer soon enough. The front door of the shed opened and the man came bursting out, but not on foot. No, he was riding in a train car, equipped with a machine gun attached to the front. The train car rumbled to life, and this time it was Charles who was on the receiving end of the attack. The train car was coming right at him, firing round after round. For the first time in a very long time, Charles retreated, turning and fleeing back into the forest. He wasn't running away, not truly, but he needed time to compose himself and figure out what to do next. He didn't have long, though. He could hear the man and his train car coming, following his trail through the woods. This time, it was Charles who was being stalked. Charles was hiding behind a massive cluster of trees, trying to decide what the best course of action would be. He wasn't going to retreat all the way back home. Not like this. He needed to find a way to become stronger, more powerful. He decided to keep moving and see what he could find. He stumbled upon the temple, and within it, the prism. Someone had already come along and placed eggs inside of it to destroy them, and though Charles was upset, he knew he could absorb the energy within. He felt himself growing stronger, bigger, angrier. He had transformed into Hell Charles. Now he was ready for a battle. He turned and found the man in the train car waiting for him. Perfect. He withstood the attack easily this time, swiping at the train car with his claws and tearing through the metal. Then the man inside hit a red button, opening a hatch in the top of the train car. Out of it, a flamethrower appeared. Charles roared, charging at the train car, and the man activated the flamethrower, spraying Charles with a fiery blast that knocked him backward. But he didn't give up. He couldn't give up. He charged the train car one more time, dodging the flames and the machine gun shots. Then he lifted the car in his claws and threw it as hard and as far as he could. It careened through the air before landing on its side, rolling over itself again and again. Then he ran to the fallen train car, ripped it open, and gobbled up the men inside. The events of the day concerned Choo Choo Charles. The humans were getting ideas, getting closer and closer to finding a way to defeat him. He certainly couldn't have that. He was going to have to prepare for what might come next, to find new ways to store energy and become bigger and badder than he ever had before. He left the husk of the train car there, hoping it would serve as a warning to any other humans that might be getting big ideas about taking him down. Choo Choo Charles slunk back into his lair and curled up in the dark. He had eaten his dinner. His eggs were safe. Or were they? Would someone dare come into the caverns again tonight?